Thank you everyone for joining here and on live stream. My name is Bounafcha Slimshoeva. I work at Resilience by Sixth Sense based in Paris, where we are an engineering design company working on helping companies to adapt better to climate change in the case of infrastructure and energy, but also beyond that we'll be talking about. So welcome again. So in this webinar, we will be talking about climate change and resilience, and we will specifically discuss the case of infrastructure and energy. This webinar is organized by the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience, Romania, and the Resilience by Sixth Sense Romania. So maybe very shortly before we go to the details what this webinar is about. So as we know, building resilient infrastructure across sector, it means planning and designing and operating infrastructure, anticipating the impact of climate change. So if we build today, what does it mean for the lifetime of the infrastructure in the coming 40 and 50 years? And also we will be touching a little bit on the political and financial issues around financing infrastructure and energy in the context of climate change. So specifically, we will address the urgency of adaptation and mitigation in the infrastructure and energy sector. We will also talk about the political framework and security and financing, funding opportunities for increasing the resilience of infrastructure and energy. And finally, we will also have some methodological presentations on how to increase the resilience of infrastructure and energy. So we will have methodological concept presentations of these, but also how to apply these in specific case studies. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our opening remark note speaker. It's Mr. Christian Bouchot will join us in a second. So I would like to give the floor to Alana Simpson. She's the Senior Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the World Bank. She's focusing on hydro and meteorological and geophysical hazards. She has vast experience in developing trusted relationship with policy, disaster risk management, scientific and institutions in developing countries. So welcome, Alana Simpson. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you everybody who's joined and for the invitation to this very important webinar. So as mentioned, I work for the World Bank, and often we get asked the question, why the World Bank? Why is the World Bank so invested in the topic of resilience? And when you think about it, our goals, our objectives are to end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity. And we know that disasters be they climate disasters, geophysical disasters, have very long and lasting impacts on populations. And so we see that unless we invest in the challenge of climate mitigation, adaptation, and disaster resilience, we will never see the objectives that we want to, and that is a world free of poverty. We invest a lot in projects that are very much specific to disasters, but more than that, we invest across sectors, and 2/3 of our investments are in making sure resilience is integrated into the transport sector, the energy sector, education, health. So rather than just focusing on disaster response or disaster preparedness specifically, we really look cross-sectorally. And the reason is we know that if we don't, we lose our investments. Globally, we lose 300 billion to disasters every year. And if you're poor, that impact is much, much higher, because the poor are most exposed to flood, most likely live in a fragile building. In fact, we eliminated disasters. 26 million people would escape poverty next year just by eliminating disasters. And we know that infrastructure is where we are most vulnerable. And the damages to transport and power generation globally is more than 30 billion. So disasters really do have this huge effect. And of course, once we lose communications or energy, the impacts are cascading. So the impact to the infrastructure is one thing, what it does to the economy and society is quite another. And of course, in Europe here, the risks are huge. We saw, 2021 was a bad year in Europe with the extreme heat, the fires. Unfortunately, 2022, and I haven't seen the final numbers, looks to have been an even worse year. And with these heat waves, our infrastructure is really struggling, and so is our society. And actually, if the temperature increases just 2 degrees, the annual number of fatalities from heat waves is likely to increase 25-fold. So these have real impacts on our society. And if we just look at heat waves, a lot of what the solution is I'll think more air conditioning. But actually, air conditioning is a solution that fails on many levels. First, it adds a lot of ambient heat. So you might be cooler, but your neighbors are hotter. It drives up energy costs at a time where energy costs are very high, and in some cases higher than salary costs for many businesses. And it increases carbon emissions, again, which drives up global temperatures. So we do have solutions, and there are a lot of proven solutions. So we published with the European Commission last year a study on the economics of prevention and preparedness. And it really shows the economic case for embedding resilience into any kind of investment. And really, we looked at, for example, extreme heat early warning systems. They bring $131 in benefit for every dollar spent. If those were stock options, people would be buying. But beyond that, we also know that we can build green, white, and blue cities. These are cities proven to reduce the heat and mean that our infrastructure struggles less with this extreme heat. But of course, a city that has a lot of green trees, has lakes, and is cooler is also going to be attractive to the population. So you're going to create sort of these points where people want to move. So we know that there is a lot that can be done. And we looked at more than 70 cases in Europe. And for every investment, with the exception, I think, of 2, was found to be economically very positive, with benefits between $2 and $10 for every dollar spent. But many investments, the return was over 20. So it makes economic sense. And we found that the biggest benefits accrued when an integrated approach was taken. So too often, we look at something from what our sector needs says, or from one particular lens, we look at that investment and say, okay, well, we need to improve it from an energy efficiency standpoint. But actually, along the way, there's many other investments we could make at the same time to really improve the economic case. So if we take a school as quite a simple piece of infrastructure, but it could be a fire station, it could be a building. If we improve that building from an energy efficiency standpoint, it's cooler already, so you've created a co-benefit. If you then also improve the fire safety in that building, of course, many benefits, but then improving the heating systems, the cooling systems, and making ultimately a more modern building. So these days, when we look at schools, we really look at them as an educational facility, something that needs to be modernized, how we can maximize energy efficiency, renewable energy, water recycling, because of course in many parts of Europe these days are a drought. So it's taken a very integrated approach to every investment that we make. And when the reality is, financing for infrastructure, particularly public infrastructure, is becoming tighter and tighter. So maximizing the economic benefits for everything we do is super important. Here in Romania, we have a number of projects. Romania is highly exposed, so I'm based in Romania, to many natural disasters, climate change related, so drought, fire, extreme heat, but also earthquakes. It's one of the highest seismically risky countries, and Bucharest is a city in Europe. And so when we look at all of our infrastructure, we look at, okay, after a disaster, what do we need first? What is going to stop the cascading impacts of this disaster? You need communications. Communications have to be able to come back quickly after any kind of disaster. Same with energy systems, at least on a limited basis. Electricity, gas, particularly in winter when disasters strike. Key roads, knowing which roads are going to be functional will allow you to move emergency personnel in and people out. And then particularly making sure your emergency services are the best that they can be. They're in modern buildings, they have the best equipment, because those are the people who are going to be putting out fires after disasters, but also rescuing people. So the problem of disaster resilience is very large, but there are key areas that we do need to start in and make sure that every city and country has really focused on these key infrastructure investments. So certainly here in Romania, we have a number of projects really focused on the emergency response sector and making sure that they are ready, but also looking at schools, because of course, many of us are parents. We want to know our children are in safe and secure schools, but schools are also emergency shelters. So they have that dual purpose. So really making sure that we think as widely as we can and really demonstrate the economics behind why investing in resilience really makes sense. And so happy to share links to some of this work that we've been doing with the European Commission, as well as here in Romania. But I think it's more needs to be done. And I think this webinar is a great example of bringing different people together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alana Simpson. This was, I think, a very, very good introduction to the overall webinar. And I have made some summary notes that I will be happy to share, also summarize and share after the webinar to the public. And yeah, I think for me, the greatest message is that, yes, we fully recognize and we fully all agree, or at least from the World Bank perspective, that investment needs to be done. It is economically also worth, and there is proof of it. And it would be, yes, indeed great if you could share in the chat the links that you have mentioned. For all the participants here, in case if I did not mention it, please use the chat and the hand raising sign to also pose your questions. If there are any right now, also on the live stream, Christian, please let us know. We are happy to take 1, 2 before we move to the next presentation. Please type it either in the chat or just directly raise your hand. Otherwise, yes, no question. Okay. No question also on the live stream. Otherwise, I'm assuming that Alana Simpson, you will be with us until the end. So in case there are questions rising, we can get back to them. So thank you very much. I would like to now introduce Nicolas Ziv, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Resilience. He is an engineer and an urban planner. He has more than 6 years of experience in the transport and infrastructure domain, as well as academic research. And yes, so since 2021, he joined Resilience and the Chief of Operations. Nicola, I hope you can hear us and we can hear you. So the floor is yours. I give it to you, and please feel free to share your screen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bounafcha. I think Didier is sharing his screen for both of us.
Yes,
for
great, it works.
presentation. So great. So thank you for the introduction. Welcome everyone to this webinar and to the presentation today. So just a summary of what we will present today with Didier. We'll first present quickly Resilience, what we do in the company in 5 minutes. Then we will show you 3 case studies of project we've done on climate adaptation. And after I will leave the floor to Didier for the 2 last case studies actually. Thank you, Didier. So at Resilience, if you can just go to the next slide eventually. Yes. So Resilience is a company specialized in climate adaptation. We basically analyze, we do climate projections, and we then analyze the impacts of climate hazards on infrastructures, cities, territories. We mainly have 3 activities: consulting activity. We do also modeling, and we develop digital tools to evaluate climate impacts on infrastructures and cities and territories. And we also do project coordination of large projects with different stakeholders. Next slide. Yes. So we basically have 2 key partnerships, let's say. One of our partnership is with special industry, and essentially remote sensing and predictive models from different research institutes in France and more generally abroad. This pillar is a key aspect of our work to analyze the impacts of climate change and climate change itself. And the other pillar we are based on is on the knowledge on assets, actually, how assets work, how to operate them, how to build them. And so this experience is based on 6 Sense expertise and on digitalization, monitoring, and engineering of infrastructure, cities, and territories. We also have a lot of partnership with international institutions like IFC from the World Bank, IUCN, Global ABC, which is an agency from the UN, and other agencies, international agencies like this. So far, since the creation of the company, which is quite long, we have been created in 2019. So we have more than 80 projects, more or less in the 5 continents, in Europe and in France, as we are a French-based company, but also in other continents and countries: Africa, Asia, North America, South America, and so on. Our clients, we work with 5 types of clients: international funders, World Bank, IFC, AFD in France, GIZ in Germany, European Commission, and many others. Citizen states, we do some climate impact assessment and adaptation solution development for the city of Paris, the government of Morocco, Senegal, or Dominica, as another example. In real estate as well, for different real estate companies, network operators, the SNCF, which is a railway operator in France, airports, Vinci Airports, some climate assessment for airports, roads, energy, transportation, and we will showcase an example just after on that aspect, and construction and industrial companies as well, like Orano, an uranium company, French uranium company specialized on uranium mining. So the first case study I will present today is about an high voltage lines in France, actually in Corsica, and I will explain the methodology and what we've done for this project. So first, what is the context of this project? So this is a project which aims to connect Italy to Corsica and Sardinia through a 9 voltage electric line. Our project is essentially focusing on Corsica, so an island south of France, from Bonifacio to Porto Vecchio, 2 cities in Corsica. And the context is that we have an aging energy supply infrastructure. There is a need to secure the energy supply of these 2 islands. And so there is a new high voltage electric line between the two cities I've mentioned. On the other side, we have an increasing risks of fire, essentially due to climate change, but not only, and also a difficulty to get the projects accepted by the population, especially high voltage line. And at that time, and it's also the case currently, high voltage energy line are considered as increasing the vulnerability of territories. If you take the example of the Dixie Fire in California, or the Paradise Fire also in California, it was because of a high voltage electric line. So they have a very, let's say, bad reputation in terms of risks and in terms of increasing the risk of wildfires actually in some parts of Corsica as well. So the idea of the projects was actually to change this approach to high voltage electric lines and to shift the infrastructure from an infrastructure which was at the initially increasing the risk to an infrastructure which could decrease the risk through and we want in the project they wanted to add some solutions to the energy line to actually use it to decrease the risk of wildfires. And how? So essentially through 3 types of solutions. Develop and reuse, the access roads which are used to build the energy supply lines to be usable by firemen later on. To reuse as well the water tank, which were developed during the construction of the line to again reuse them for firemen later. And another important element is to set up cameras at the top of the electric towers to be able to have some view on the landscape and if fires are starting or not. And it's basically powered by artificial intelligence, so it can automatically detect if fire are starting or not. So we are using the fact that energy towers and electric line towers are very high to set up cameras on it. And so then the idea of the study that we will show now is to see where are the best spots to put these cameras. So the first part of the methodology was to identify what are the riskiest area for wildfires, where the hazard is the most where are the most risky areas, and then we analyze what burns best finally in the landscape of the electric line. Then what are the most strategic areas of the territory? What is the most important to save in case of wildfires? And finally, these elements allowed us to evaluate and optimize the positioning of the cameras to evaluate their impacts and vulnerability. So to do this assessment and the first step was to analyze, okay, where are the fires, what are the areas where the fires are the most probable to occur. So for that, we used different kind of data, essentially the past wildfires in Corsica, the climate conditions, how they are now and how they will be in the future as well, because the idea is to consider climate change in the analysis. What is the topography? Topography, land use, and vegetation are key elements to analyze the fire hazards, and all of that gave us a hazard map that you can see on the right of the slide. The more red you are, the more risky area you are actually. And you have here in purple each point is a tower energy for the high voltage line. So then when we have the hazard, we then analyzed two other things according to the element of the territory, what burns best, and then what is the most important for the continuity of life in the territory, what are the strategic elements of the territory, like fireman stations, police stations, hospitals, and so on. So that gave us a knowledge of how the territory is vulnerable and what are the strategic elements of the territory. On that purpose, we also interviewed firemen from different French departments all over France, not only in Corsica, but also in other parts of France. Then we considered also different elements of the territory to have factors which can impact the vulnerability. Some elements can increase the vulnerability. For example, the slopes or the soil, the proximity. Slopes or biomass density, for example, and so other elements can decrease the vulnerability of the territory. For example, proximity to water supply can be an element which can decrease the vulnerability if you're close to a water supply point or if you're far from it. So we consider this as well, these elements in the vulnerability assessment. We ended up with these three maps actually. So you have on the left what burns best. So that's the element of the territory which basically are the most the elements which can be very problematic in case of fires. You have the strategic potential. So what are the most important element of the territory for the continuity of life? Fireman stations, hospitals, industrial areas, and so on. And that gave us a global vulnerability map you have here on the map, on the right, sorry, which combines the two other maps you have on the left. So based on that, we were able to analyze what is the vulnerability of the territory. Then we have the electric towers you have here on the picture on the left, and the picture you have on the left is if you put one camera on each tower, what you could see on the territory. So that's the optimal solution, let's say, in terms of disaster reduction. However, to set up only one camera costs €500,000. So for that reason, it was not possible for the project to put one camera on all the towers, and we had to optimize and to choose in which tower we would put the cameras, and that's where we use the global vulnerability map and the vulnerability analysis we used previously to see, okay, what if we develop some scenarios with what if scenario, if we put one camera here or there, what could be what is the territory we could see with the cameras and how it can impact the vulnerability. So next slide, Didier. Yes, again. Yes, so based on that, actually from the equipment of 260 towers, which were highlighted previously, we ended up to only 10 towers to be equipped with cameras, and based on that, we can watch actually the elements of the territory which are the more risky, based on the riskiest area on the territory in terms of occurrence of the fire risk, based on the strategic element of the territory to monitor, and based on the global vulnerability of the territory. So only with by equipping 10 electric towers over the line instead of 260, we were able to monitor the most important parts of the territory in terms of wildfires. All of that can then be, if you can go next slide, Didier. All of that is available through a 3D GIS tool, actually, which can be used either by the energy provider or by the firemen. to watch the territory and to eventually change the towers to equipped and so on, and to see what is the coverage of the territories the cameras can record. So thank you for your attention. I will then give the floor to Didier for our 2 other case studies.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. That was really good overview about the methodology, but also in detail the application of it. I think we could continue with the presentation of Didier and then come back on these 2 sessions to the question and answer session for both presentations. So those please who are having questions, either type them on the chat now or later, so we will take them up in the after this second presentation. So before Didier starts, Didier Soto, he is the head of digital solution and climate change resilience at Resilience. And he has extensive experience on international projects and vulnerability assessments across countries. He previously participated in European research projects on evaluating the well-being and adaptive capacity of territories. He is also very active in the scientific domain, publishing peer-reviewed articles on vulnerability assessment. And yes, so at Resilience, he's developing methodologies and conducting vulnerability assessments across sectors. So here we are. Didier, please, the floor is yours. You may continue. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bounafcha, and hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. I will continue this presentation by introducing you an innovation that we developed at Resilience, which is called the Resilience Performance Assessment, which is a digital solution that is applied to evaluate resilience, to provide technical solutions to increase the resilience faced to the vulnerability of infrastructures. And I will mainly focus on this second use case, to the energetic performance of buildings. For this case, we work for CDC Habitat, which is the first French social house operator. We developed an application of this innovative solution, the Resilience Performance Assessment, and we develop it as a turnkey solution adapted to urban built assets and all their equipment, including networks, electric networks. This tool scores the current and future state of resilience performance by considering the application of adaptation actions and energy efficiency at the scale of buildings. You may know the energetic performance assessment. The RPA, Resilience Performance Assessment, is a pendant of this metrics to provide solution recommendations to increase resilience faced to its current state of risk. So the RPA, Resilience Performance Assessments, considers several climate hazards. Here in this case, 11 climate hazards: flooding, heat waves, wildfires, dryness, among others. We calculate for each hazard an exposure score for each IPCC scenario. Here we will focus more on the RCP 8.5 for the Horizon 2050. And the score that you will obtain by using the RPA is combined with the sensibility of urban assets and their overall networks, including the external energy network, to provide a final vulnerability assessment. I will show you a demo. Just here, the video will start. No. Just let me try to, a little time to launch, excuse me. So here you will have the display of the GIS-based platform of the impacts of climate change of the built asset in urban areas. In background, you can see the exposure score to flooding, and the color range appears to the green, from the green to the red, according to the urban vulnerability of assets. This hypervisor allows to visualize the impacts of single hazards, but also their cumulative impacts. We can therefore identify which are the riskiest territories and which ones must benefit from specific measures to face current and future climate risk and to ensure energetic performance, as discussed by Mrs. Simpson in the beginning. To define which are the most relevant strategies in terms of energetic infrastructure sensibility, you can use this analytic dashboard included in the RPA, composed of specific menus. They help to quantify and qualify the impacts of each climate hazard of urban assets at the scale of a neighborhood or an entire city. For each asset, including electric asset, a global score is calculated per hazard and cumulative hazards. Then dedicated menus proposed to each end users to qualify potential disorders in terms of security, comfort, uses, and services. Different marks could be obtained during this diagnosis processing. It helps to precisely determine the estimated and needed cost for each predetermined measures compared to the cost of inaction. Here, for example, you will have a benchmark of preventive and curative solution adapted to each part, to each component of a building, including electric networks, to reinforce the resilience and to have an overall view of the cost needed to strengthen resilience. And then you have synthetic dashboards that are automatically produced. They allow to visualize the benefits of the investment cost and to measure a resilience performance for each building, including all their energetic components. The RPA is currently used by the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction to provide metrics to guarantee the application of the 10 principles for effective action to reinforce resilience of buildings and their networks. I will introduce you a third use case now, which deals with the application of this tool, the RPA, for a systemic resilience assessment of energetic infrastructures. In this use case, we will have a territorial view of the sensibility and the cascading effect brought by climate change impacts on energetic infrastructures.
Okay, Didi, just a short interruption. Please take your time. You have sufficient time.
Okay, thank you, Benasha. In this study, funded by the International Finance Corporation, subsidiary of the World Bank, we developed a platform that we are not, unfortunately, allowed to show due to confidential agreement with the Dominican government. But we developed a tool that brings added values to deciders in terms of anticipating climate change issues through a dedicated GIS-based visualization tool, allowing an anticipation of the spatial impacts of climate risks according to different scenarios and periods. Here, you can see on the screen a screenshot of the electric network. In red, you have the current electric network in this Caribbean island. And in the background, you have the cyclonic multi-hazard exposure map. It's an innovation developed by Resilience to characterize both impacts of climate change hazards that occur during the occurrence of a cyclone. So in red, you have the most riskiest part of the island, and in the other colors, here you have the master plan of energetic network and electric network to reinforce the resilience of the infrastructures. And with such a tool, you are able to visualize where the location of energetic infrastructures are already at risk and how we could define some technical solution with aerial or undergrounding, as you can see here, to develop the best resilient energetic transport faces to complex risk that will occur faster and more intense in the future, such as the cyclones. One of the key outputs of the RPA is not only bringing information about exposure and vulnerability maps, but also its ability to deliver dashboards to help stakeholders defining their own adaptation, mitigation, and investment strategies, as you have seen before for the second use case. Here we developed a specific dashboard to prioritize which are the key projects dealing with energetic infrastructures to reinforce the resilience of critical infrastructures of this island in Caribbean. What is interesting in this kind of approach is that you could develop some investment strategies and analyze their compliance with their national and international commitments. And the last use case that we will introduce today is an offer that Resilience is currently developing for cities, for network owners, network managers, is Resil Heat Island. As its name is indicating, it's a solution to characterize urban heat island and to reinforce resilience of critical infrastructures in the context of climate change. Here, I will develop how it could help to optimize energy consumption. So another part of dealing with energetic infrastructures. In this use case, we model the behavior of a new railway terminal in France, which will host a commercial center. The study was dedicated to quantify the cooling refreshment brought by nature-based solution. As you can see on the picture, it is a green roof, and you have also green facades. And this new construction has been built to optimize energy consumption and release to cool the building during heat waves in a very hot place concerned by your already urban heat island. I will show you a video that shows how the solutions deployed on site will bring a cooling of the air temperature. That's what you can see. The air temperature is what you can see shaped on the buildings, and the colors in green and blue are the cooling effects brought by the solution we develop with this nature-based solution, and also with the architect and all the building manager to reinforce the thermoradiative properties of buildings, and all the solutions to promote energy consumption at the scale of the building. We can see that the external solution could bring refreshing of 2 degrees on the roof and the facades. And here you have bubbles of refreshing to specifically determine the spatial impacts of this solution near the railway terminal. We also work with architects and to optimally place the ventilation release that you can see their effect here in red. We are obliged to put ventilation released to optimize this energy system in the buildings, but we worked with architects to localize them, not to compromise mainly the cooling performance of the solution, as you can see here with these 2 peripheric spots. So this kind of solution could help at any stage of a building to evaluate its capacity to refresh the external environment and to bring solution to optimize energy consumption at the scale of a building. I thank you very much for your attention, and we are open to answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Didier. Yes, so indeed, it would be great, yes, to address questions. I see there are some in the chat. We will go back to them in a second. Just to summarize, so Nicolas was talking about how to make best use of electricity system to use it for prevention of fires, which are increasing in the context of climate change, as you know, in Europe. And Didier was talking about the vulnerability assessment with very different case studies and how to apply the methodology of the resilience performance analysis to assessment to increase the resilience, for example, of infrastructure, or how to use it to plan new infrastructure. So I have here two questions. One goes to Nicolas. And it says, so did the authorities use your solution in a real life case? And if yes, did they observe some improvements in terms of time necessary to intervene, risk reduction, to own personnel, and so on? So basically, was it really applied, and was it helpful to prevent these? Thanks.
So maybe I can answer quickly to this question. And actually, that's a good question. For the system we developed for now, for Corsica, the line is still under construction, the new electric line. We have now just ended the phase to select the electric towers to put the cameras on, and also the road built during the construction of the line to reuse, as well as the water tanks. So it's a bit too soon to say if the authorities will use it or not. However, what we know is that in other departments and even in Corsica, the authorities are already using this kind of system, of monitoring system for wildfires with cameras to evaluate and to monitor the risk of wildfires. So we know it's something which can be used and which is apparently useful, as they are using it in other areas. Maybe the innovation that we bring here is to combine the construction of a new electric line with the development of this monitoring system. So that's maybe the innovation here, but we are convinced that it will be useful for them, as they already use it in other areas, and also because they know how to use it, because it also requires some capacity building or some learning on how to use it, but that's something that is more and more used, I would say, to monitor wildfires.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas, for this response. I see there are no questions in the chat and no on Facebook. I was informed. I have more general questions to both of you, Didier and Nicolas. So the methodologies that you were presenting, can you please elaborate a little bit on how they are replicatable to other areas as well, or is it specifically to the cases you developed? So it would be just great to know more a little bit about their applicability to other areas. Thanks. And also maybe to other sectors. So now you presented infrastructure and energy, but are these methodologies specifically to these, or could they also be used for other sectors, maybe these two aspects? Thanks a lot.
Maybe I will start and let Didier continue. So the methodology we've used for the electric lines is basically replicable to any territory, any infrastructures. It's basically using satellite data, and our only limit, I would say, is the availability of data to do the vulnerability analysis, to know, for example, the types of soil, the types of vegetation, the strategic elements, where they are located, what are they used for. This kind of things we were able to know on Corsica, and with open data, I would say, solutions. And so for us, our only limit is availability of data and how we can use them, actually. On another aspect, we also developed these cameras to monitor wildfires, because that was one of the main risks identified by the authorities. But these cameras can be used actually for many other risks. They can be used for for flooding, for storms. We had some storms, for instance, in Corsica this summer. It can be used for that. It can be used for landslides, can be used for many other events, even man-made hazard, actually. So the focus was here on wildfires, but actually these cameras can be used for many other events. That's what I wanted to highlight. And on any kind of infrastructures, the only limit is the available data on how to analyze the risk and the vulnerability of the territory.
Thank you a lot, Nicolas. Maybe Didi, you would like
Yeah.
to also shortly elaborate? Thanks.
Yeah, I will speak about the resilience performance assessment solution that we developed. It is not a software. In fact, it has not been built like this. It has been built as a turnkey solution, based first on analysis of the customer's needs, users' needs. So de facto, it is a replicable solution. We try to understand first which is the need in terms of resilience, if it deals with infrastructures, territories, investment projects, or both. And the main advantage of this tool is its flexibility to different kinds of ads, single and combined, to broad vulnerability assessments of infrastructures, territories, and projects. That's why we could bring each part of the component of this solution to the needs of our customers and partners. So it is replicable solution. I speak here about energetic infrastructures. We already developed it for transports and logistics, for mainly investment projects, for infrastructures that have been not yet built. We use it for buildings. We use it for specific cities to have an overall view of the resilience capacity of a city. So yes, it is replicable, and the main interest is its capacity to model the resilience performance and to bring technical solution and their costs. And we develop this model and we adapt this model to the quality of the data we could get. So it is very replicable.
Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed, it's probably really dependent also on the data availability and data quality. Thanks a lot. I would like to hand over to Mr. Vice President Adrian Dutra, who raised his hand for a question, please.
Thank you very much for these comprehensive presentations. I would like to ask Nicolas, going back to what he said a little bit earlier, that the cameras on the electric line could be used for some other reasons. In the same manner, in the world, there are many other sensors. There are air and maritime radars, there are satellite solutions, there are more advanced sensors that could contribute to early warning for climate change, for disasters. Is there any solution to use their data, for example, in data centers or something like that, in order to improve the early warning for this infrastructure and energy transport infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for your question. And indeed, there are many ways, many different ways of monitoring this risk, and satellites, for instance, are one of the good example of that. I would say that maybe the advantage of actually what we usually propose is a combination of this monitoring system, because they can be used for different purposes. For example, on wildfire, satellites are not always looking at the same spots. They are more or less turning, and sometimes the monitoring system is not at the good position to evaluate the risk over one territory. So a combination of satellites data, cameras which are in live data stream, I would say, could be a solution. But one problem of cameras is that they have only one part of the landscape, basically. So that's why also combine it with, for example, satellites could be an idea. There are also other kind of sensors. You can use drones. You can use more basic sensor about climate conditions and humidity of soils and some elements. And that's usually the combination of all that data, which can be very interesting to have a better idea of what is the risk and where, if we talk about wildfire, for example, where they are the most prone to happen, based on all of this information, and then can help the authority to react and to even prevent the risk. So yes, I would say that they all have their advantages and disadvantages, and to have a comprehensive idea, a combination of all that would be the best.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see there are no other raised hands and no questions in the chat, but again, Nicola and Didier are with us until the end of the webinar, so please feel free to pose your questions in case they arise. Yes, we would like to continue, and I would like to invite the Ambassador Sorin Ducaro, who will be talking about the relation between climate change, security, and defense from the NATO and EU perspective. Ambassador Sorin Ducaro, he's the director of the European Union Satellite Center since 2019. He also was or had the post of NATO Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges from 2013 to 2017. Mr. Ducaro held 3 ambassadorial positions on behalf of Romania at the UN and at NATO. And finally, he is a diplomat with a long-standing experience in transatlantic and international relations. So we look forward to your talk, Ambassador. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, let me also thank the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center for the invitation. I will jump directly into the subject matter of this panel, while explaining first in a couple of words the general role of SATCEN. The Satellite Center was created 30 years ago by European Union member states to allow an autonomous Earth observation analysis entity. It was first under the let's say auspices of the Western European Union, and it became an EU agency 10 years later, so in 2002. The role of the Satellite Center is to provide situational awareness to support the decision-making and the actions of the European Union in the fields of common foreign and security policy, and in particular common defense, common security and defense policy. It's normal in order to take the best political decisions, and in order to support EU missions, be they civilian missions, humanitarian missions, or also military missions, it's important to have such a tool that exploits, in particular, the data from space sensors, but more and more blends this with data from other sources, from air traffic management, maritime traffic management, from open sources, from drones or even from sometimes from human intelligence sources. So this is the core mission of the Satellite Center. It's also mandated to maximize the synergies and complementarities with all other activities in the European Union related to security, defense, and space. And from this point of view, I should mention that beyond the core mission of providing security from space to Earth through Earth observations or geospatial intelligence analysis, it also has a role in providing security for space, because it is the front desk of the space surveillance and tracking consortium of currently 7 member states. It will evolve in a 14 member states partnership that use their sensors in order to focus on what happens in the sky and prevent accidents, collisions, or in case of collisions, have a fragmentation analysis or analysis of object returning to space. Now, the core activity, as I mentioned, is geospatial intelligence analysis, but the center also is involved in developing its own IT tools, including artificial intelligence tools, to make the effort of the analyst more efficient. Capability development tools focused on Earth observation, also engage in training and cooperation with other EU bodies. The center has been always focused to be at the cutting edge of technological developments and harness the most recent research and innovation, actually get involved in it by applying for special projects within the Horizon Europe program. And the core approach was to, of course, align with EU strategic priorities, respond to what the users are requesting, and of course, harnessing the latest technology options. Now, one of the strategic priorities in the EU is related to climate change. And of course, specifically the role of SATCEN is to bring the relevant analysis related to the impact of climate change upon security matters. And before giving you some concrete examples, I should mention that in order to do this efficiently and take on board the latest advancements in terms of space technology and information technology, what SATCEN does first is involved in the scanning of what best technologies exist on the horizon, from big data, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, practically the creation of digital twin Earth through the data harnessed from satellites, then applying the know-how that exists to its operational process and capabilities, and beyond that, so to make this activity more efficient, and beyond that, exploring the new applications, domains that would enhance the service portfolio. And this is done in a synergy and cooperation with the key other partners from the EU ecosystem. I'm not going to enter in all the details, but of course, the key partners are the European Defence Agency, but also the European Commission, in particular through the Copernicus program or Horizon Europe. To get more concrete on this aspect, well, if we look to the definition of climate security, from the perspective of the EU foreign and security policy, that should include all the social practices or political initiatives through which societies, states, humans build indeed capacity to prevent or mitigate, manage climate related risks. And of course, climate related risks have many implications in terms of economic development on societal level. But what we are looking mainly forward is to focus on those aspects that generate a multiplier effect, which could trigger instability from the point of view of security or even defense. And one approach, one perspective is, of course, strategic, to be able to analyze, come with potential options to allow the decision makers to take the right mitigation measures, and also more and more to generate anticipation. So it's triggering alerts. It's then making the analysis of impact, but also anticipating potential further risks. And in particular, the core concern is where climate change could generate such complex impact that they could generate conflict. So as mentioned, core lines of action to raise the awareness based on trustworthy data to support the decision making at the EU level, by, of course, continuously monitoring climate security related events. Then to generate the analysis on the impact, including with midterm stimulation of development of such impact, including in multi-dimensional security crisis context. And of course, as I mentioned, more and more look for artificial intelligence tools to detect anomalies that would allow for anticipative responses to climate hazards. So before they have potentially devastating effect upon human security. So this early warning anticipative element is something which is more and more interesting to be employed, and it's done through some quite sophisticated modeling based on huge volumes of data and AI tools, which are, by the way, developed in-house, because for such applications you cannot get artificial intelligence tools directly from the shelf. They have to be adapted to the focus on security and defense. Some examples: the support through climate change analysis to the EU policy of providing development aid across the board. Having relevant geospatial intelligence analysis linked to climate change can indeed make this EU support more efficient. And one of the objectives of the EU is that this support makes the beneficiary countries more resilient. So the key input that we're providing is to come with analysis that reduce exposure to risks from climate change and manage potential impact. Another example is the impact of flooding on the road networks, communication networks. In this case, it's the Niger Delta. And again, the scope is, of course, also to help crisis management, but the more strategic scope is to allow decisions that would prevent repetition of such disasters in the future, or actually in sensitive areas prevent them from the very beginning. The climate change impact has also a huge relevance with regards to the management of water resources. There are many examples in the world where shared water resources generate tension and also potential conflict. Following the development of the volume of existing water upon rivers or lakes can determine or anticipate potential tensions that can rise, especially with the droughts that have been more and more visible in the last years. In this case is a river basin in Georgia, upon which some of the neighbor countries in the Caucasus are dependent on. Other examples are related to the construction of dam works, again, that change the flow of water resources and have an impact upon access to water resources of neighboring countries, and therefore one could potentially generate tension. The Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia is a telling example from this point of view. And the satellite analysis can calculate how much of the volume of water is captured in one of the country and then not released in another one. It can also project what this would mean in the longer term, and therefore potentially it could be a basis of supporting some fair sharing agreements. The other aspects have to do with the impact of energy storage solution upon the environment. There are storages which have vulnerabilities. They generate leaks and can really have a significant impact in destroying the environment over large areas. This can also be analyzed and from especially with multispectral satellite sensors, and then the impact could be both monitored, evaluated, monitored, and also future anticipation could be included in the conclusions of the analysis. very, very interesting and very important area of our focus is what happens in the Arctic. With climate change, the northern transport route becomes more and more available. With this, also increasing risk of accidents is to be considered and depicted. And here we can see how infrastructures are developed, in this case in Russia, in order to enhance, harness the economic potential of the region, including, as one can see here, in 2020 in the picture, the build of air bases, military air bases, to, I would say, support from a strategic and military point of view some of the key economic and energy related interests in the region. So the Arctic, the climate change in the Arctic is changing the strategic landscape, and this can be monitored, of course, with satellite analysis as well. We are involved in the so-called ARCOS project, which is aimed as this is in under the Copernicus program, and the great project with the EU Commission in developing an early warning system and providing continuous monitoring capabilities in the Arctic. And the platform includes also IT tools that can, trigger autonomous anomalous behavior in order to provide specific alerts. And it's mainly focused on the ship traffic hazards, and also the impact of industrial harbors and airports activity in the region. Of course, the access to water beyond that of river that I mentioned before is another element that can be monitored, is also with multispectral technology. The depletion of aquifers in specific regions can be observed, and again, they tend to indicate potential conflicts. So these developments can generate early warning elements. This is an example where we can see from pictures from the ground what the impact of a depletion of underground water can mean. It actually shifts the whole land mass down. Interestingly, from the satellites, this evolution can be predicted in advance by monitoring the decrease of volumes. I think this is one of the last examples. The water reservoir can be in specific regions, can be determined and actually displayed in different color codes. And of course, the historic developments can be presented, but based on the historic evolution, the prediction for the future as well. I would also mention that biomass can be also monitored with multispectral satellite technology. So the quality of soil, humidity, quality, nutritional effects, capacity to produce yields in terms of crops can be monitored, and it's more and more a key item whereby the prediction with regard to food insecurity can be developed. And of course, food insecurity could lead towards migration or conflict, so we can monitor these aspects as well. Therefore, we have developed a global Earth monitoring that really aims to detect changing in the Earth surface in terms of agricultural potential with a number of parameters, humidity, fertility, and so on. Therefore, being able to depict trends and future development predictions. Climate security vulnerability index has been developed also by monitoring the land changes and also providing early warning and risk assessment. So I could have continued with many more examples. This was just to give you a bit of a flavor of how much can be done by using satellite sensors and associated technology and analytics. I think I would mention that I think there's a gold rush in terms of space technology evolution and development, and this can and should be even more harnessed to focus on the impact of climate change, including upon aspects that have to do with security and geostrategy. I will stop here, but I'm ready to respond to any particular questions.
Thank you so much. This was indeed a very good overview of what. Yes, thank you for stopping the screen sharing, and also for me, lots of news about the global monitoring database, for example. Is really, there were lots of new aspects for me personally in the call. I see there are 2 questions in the chat, and instead of me now trying to read and interpret them, we can make it more live. So I can hand over to the author of the question. It is first Nicola, and after him it is Didi, who posted 2 questions related to this presentation. Please.
Thank you, Bounafcha. Yes, indeed, I had one question. My question was, to your opinion, Sorin, is it imaginable that climate change impacts, especially in the EU, let's say, can increase our global vulnerability? So, for example, all the potential impacts of climate change and climate hazards on our infrastructures, on our society and the population, and so on, can finally increase our global vulnerability generally speaking. And if that happens, could it lead to aggressiveness of external stakeholders, let's say, not necessarily conflict, but could be economic aggressiveness, conflicts indeed, maybe other kind of aggressiveness from external stakeholders to the EU, for example. So is it something that you study? Is it something that is studied over the EU, for example? Yes, maybe you have some elements on that.
Well, this is the concern. This is why we are involved very strongly now in analyzing the potential of climate change of providing insecurity. And how can this happen? Through population movements and migration. If there is a shortage of water, if soil is not fertile, one can imagine significant movements and then migration, and actually an amplification of some migration trends which the EU had to face anyway in the last years or so, due to conflicts like Syria, for example, and so on. Secondly, there's a lot of potential for tension in the neighborhood of Europe, be it the southern or eastern neighborhood, which can be generated or just amplified by climate change. If we think about the Arctic and the fact that the Arctic, the new routes generate some tendencies of militarization along this route. This has an impact, I would say, globally, and it has an impact also for a number of EU member states that are closer to the Arctic, from Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and so on. But again, globally. So I think we are just beginning to scratch the surface in terms of providing profound strategic long-term analysis about this impact. I think we have discovered that we have already data exists, and we can accumulate more through the sensors, more and more sensors that we have in space. And using space sensor is one of the most efficient way to monitor these developments, and then using the modern IT tools, efficient way to flag, you know, when potential thresholds for conflict are met, so that things can be anticipated and hopefully prevented.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Thank you very much. Indeed. Didier, would you like to continue with your question?
Yes, thank you for this very interesting presentation, Mr. Doucarou. I have interest on what you say concerning the conflict early warning system. I understand that you use satellite data to anticipate this kind of conflict, but do you develop specific indexes in this monitoring approach to use other data that satellites to feed this early warning system? Could you indicate us more in detail how you consider and how you prevent the stakeholders or population for an impending conflict?
Well, there are a couple of projects that include also development of relevant parameters, call them indexes, that you know, reflect developments and the potential reach of thresholds that could be entering a conflict and insecurity territory. So depends on how the projects are formulated, or depends of how the requests are formulated. In our case, the main requesters are the European Union External Action Service, who is interested to have situational awareness and early warning in order to fine-tune its policies vis-a-vis different regions, member states as well, but also EU entities that are involved in specific programs with specific regions. So and more we are considering to develop what is called a climate footprint for the planning of EU missions and operations, because in certain areas the planning of the mission really depend on specific climate aspects, like regular floodings or tendency towards long-term droughts and so on. So it depends on the requester. We are very much task driven. Our input is then feeded into the services in the European Union that determine the strategic evaluation, and then potentially specific programmatic efforts to address these aspects. Again, StatCen is operational and task driven, so we deliver upon the type of requests that we receive.
Thank you very much.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Dukaru. And I think it actually flows very well with now me introducing the next speaker to continue from the European Union perspective. Mr. Christian Bușoi is able to join us now, who is the member of the European Parliament, President of the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. Welcome, Mr. Bușoi, and yes, we look forward to hear your perspective from the European Parliament perspective on the topic on climate change and energy and infrastructure. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, I would like to appreciate the issue that you are debating today, as it is extremely important not to forget that when you talk about climate change, we need also to look to the resilience of our infrastructures in Europe and worldwide. I was also happy to see Ambassador Dukaru. We work closely together. He was present in ITRE committee, impressed my colleagues with the very good activity made by the center that he's managing. Warm hello to everybody, and I will say a few words on the climate resilience and what this means from the energy perspective, because the committee that I'm chairing is mainly focused on energy, industry, research and energy, but of course is very much involved in the whole debate, legislative or just policy debates at the EU level. We have still a long path to deliver on a resilient energy sector, but we also need to take into account that our journey has started with our climate goals. We have our climate goals. It is very clear now. Green Deal, total decarbonization in 2050, 55% reduction until 2030, what Fit for 55 package now in the interinstitutional negotiations is aiming for. We are then working on a framework that will help us to reach these goals with long-term commitments and investments, because clearly we need long-term commitments and investments. On the other hand, we also need the flexibility to adjust to the realities, as shown in the last couple of months, to adjust to the spike in the energy prices, to adjust to the work consequences, to find rapid solutions to the independence of supply and the security of supply, not forgetting the long-term objectives, but be ready to mitigate the risks and the big challenges that we have now for the coming years. Therefore, the climate-driven actions and goals, combined with the fact that we need affordable energy for every citizen and every industry sectors, with the fact that we need independence and security of supply, will play a key role in understanding where new infrastructure assets might be sited and built. This also will driven our investment. Yes, ensuring resilience in energy infrastructure will be expensive, but it is an investment on the long run, because the aim is to build future-proof infrastructure so the investments are as efficient and pragmatic as possible. My personal belief is that clean energy infrastructure, from wind turbines, solar panels, solar parks, hydrogen valleys, and transmission lines to nuclear reactors and hydropower, will both help us to reach our climate goals, but also will help us to adapt to the current challenges and to mitigate the increase, the extraordinary increase in the prices of energy. This is what I tried as chair ITRE to convince also my colleagues in our committee that the answer and the investment in the clean energy technologies will help us fight against the two very important challenges. Nevertheless, a connected modern energy grid represents a crucial element to making our energy sector more resilient to external shocks, more competitive, and better fit for the energy market of the 21st century, with the consumers at its heart and an increasing share of variables renewable energy in the grid. With the aim to achieve our climate and energy goals and to enhance innovation, sustainability, and growth, remaining competitive worldwide, because Europe should remain competitive worldwide, even that we do a lot of efforts and investments in order to be the champions in the fight against climate change. The Union needs an up-to-date, high-performance energy infrastructure that, as I said, is future-proof, cost-efficient, and also can provide the security of energy supply, including diversification of routes, sources, and suppliers. That's why we need to focus on research and innovation, also to develop very high-performance energy infrastructures. Priority corridors, as well as the eligibility criteria, should follow the evolution of the energy system and maintain the consistency with the Union policy priorities, in particular in the context of the long-term decarbonization pathway. I see that resilient infrastructure are the ones that adapt now and are able to mitigate later. For example, we shouldn't forget that during the transition phase, gas pipelines and interconnections will play an important role to ensure energy security supply, affordability, and sustainability for many regions in the Union. And even that the pressure of the political groups and the member states who are more enthusiastic than others to advance as fast as possible to the climate change goals, we revised the legislation of the interconnections and Connecting Europe facility mechanism and the projects of common interest, and we excluded or made very difficult to invest the interconnections on the gas infrastructure. We understand now how important it is to keep this option also open, because we need to increase our interconnections as part also of the REPowerEU strategy, the strategy that will make us independent from the Russian gas. Russia will never be able to blackmail us again, to use energy as a weapon against European Union. In the same time, REPowerEU will help us to meet and to reach our climate goals, because the same gas infrastructure that we are building now with the interconnections that I mentioned, if we do in a smart way, this will be used in the future for transporting biogas. They will be used to transport hydrogen, representing a low-cost, feasible solution in the process of energy transition and a secure roadmap to diversification, considering the fact that high initial capital costs of new pipeline constructions constitutes at the moment a major barrier to expanding the infrastructure across EU. As a final conclusion, I could say that European Union and European Parliament is very much committed to continue with the climate change agenda, to pursue our strategic goals, to be ready to reduce until 2030 with 55% the CO2 emissions, to build carbon-free economy, energy sector, transport sector, part of the agriculture, and of course, a lot of our industry until 2050. But in the same time, not to forget that everything that we are building or we are upgrading the current infrastructure will need to ensure resilience. And in the very difficult times that we are now living, we see how important is to have the good balance between the very ambitious goals to participate to the climate change fight, but in the same time, not to forget about competitivity, affordability, the need to support our industries, the need to have decent prices for energy, and also very important to ensure the independence of our energy sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bușoi. It was great to hear that nevertheless that we live in challenging time, that there is a very strong EU commitment still on the energy sector and to improve the overall resilience of it. Thank you so much. As we are approaching towards the end of the webinar, I would like to invite on the final closing note the president of the ERC, Mr. Ovidiu Raiecki, who has been the president of the European Atlantic Resilience Center since February 2022. In the past, he has been the vice president of the Committee for Defense, Public Order and National Security in the Chamber of Deputies, member of the Parliament for Diaspora for Bucharest. He is also a writer who is specializing in the Middle East and the Black Sea region. Mr. President, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everything is well on the technical level. First of all, I would like to congratulate all of today distinguished panelists and just offer some closing remarks from the perspective of the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience. And I must start by saying that one of the first things we observed in our studies is the essential value of the symbiosis between state and society in building resilience. The experience of some advanced countries in the field of resilience, and I will offer you just a few examples like Japan, Finland, Switzerland, South Korea, prove that it is much more effective to educate the public about possible risk and even ask the public to participate in exercises. And we can see the case of earthquake simulation and exercises in Japan, than to deny any potential risk to avoid panic. Panic, in fact, is specific to societies where there is no education in the field of resilience. And from this point of view, we are talking about an element of resilience that comes not so much from centralized measures and planning of the institution of force, but from the very fabric of society. We call this type of resilience organic resilience. A resilience generated by society as a whole, not a resilience built overnight by a central structure, like the MOD of the Minister of Interior. And the most important areas of organic resilience, from our point of view, from our experience, are education and infrastructure. Infrastructure cannot be built overnight. It is the result of decades and even centuries of central and local administration, but it is also the fruit of a social and even a civilizational project that favors the construction of efficient and functional infrastructure. And no matter how good the post-disaster intervention plans are here in the Balkans or in an eastern city, we know from our own experience that there will be a major problem due to narrow or flooded roads in the case of such a scenario. General Ben Hodges has pinpointed on several occasions that no matter how hard NATO military planners try, they will not be able to quickly bring troops from Germany to the Black Sea shores
in the event of a hypothetical aggression against a NATO state in the region, using roads and railways that have not been developed for 30 years in this region. Not every bridge allows a tank to pass through, and not every waterway allows a large shipment of grain from the Black Sea region to the Middle East. The same things can be said in the field of education. A country with a significant number of illiterates, with a chronic inability to critically analyze information delivered by the media, is a country vulnerable to misinformation and hybrid aggression. And the best indicator in the proportion of is the proportion of vaccinated people from the total population during the pandemic, knowing that countries with low numbers of vaccinated people are more affected by the pandemic, and these low numbers are based on worse results in the field of education. When I think of resilience, I have a simple definition in mind: the ability of a society to withstand shocks, natural catastrophes, external and hybrid actions, health or economic crisis, with as little damage and loss as possible, and with an immediate ability to bounce back to functionality. Studies dedicated to community and social resilience were preceded by those on individual resilience, defined by Bern Christina as the strength to return from a depressing situation to a full life again. And an essential element in understanding resilience is the elastic nature of its action. The Englishman says bounce back and bounce forward. Firmus et quercus agilis ut harundo, that means hard as oak, flexible as reed, as the Latin said. So resilience presupposes that in the event of a shock, an impact, the targeted organism can bear the pressure by proving flexibility, adaptability, not a rigidity that favors breakage. It seems to me that we find in this basic definition everything that has been discussed today. It seems essential to me that in our future projects, we include that resilience quotient that is imposed by climate change and energy perspectives. What we build for hundreds of years, not for a decade. The resilience project we envision must include the projection of the world in year 2100, not just today. And we must require national policies, European policies, and laws to ensure that we provide our children and grandchildren with a resilient infrastructure. And we at the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience try to do this by focusing on research efforts on the concept of urban resilience, which we consider essential for a good preparation of the future. Thank you very much for today's contributions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajecki. This was indeed a very good closing remark. And before maybe we close everything, I think I would like to summarize more general messages of the webinar, coming back to the overall objective of the webinar. And there are many notes I took, but I think the ones that I would like to highlight is that there is a clear indication of investments in resilience in the sector of infrastructure and energy. We heard this from the World Bank perspective. We heard this from the European Parliament perspective, and that's really great to hear. It's not only a general statement that was mentioned by you, but it's really you also share the publication from the World Bank perspective. Thanks for that, that it is actually quantifiable already to invest in resilience, and that $1 investment can be more than $10 in the future. So it's really encouraging to hear. And there is also a good technical message. We saw many methodologies from the resilience presentation, and from the presentation of the European Union Satellite Center, that there is vast majority of data and methodology to detect the vulnerability of the sectors. And these are not methodologies just for one case, but really replicable. So they are actually, able to be applied anywhere. And finally, I like the term organic resilience that was mentioned by President Raecki. I think it's a very nice closing remark, that we need to start investing, and I think we do it, at least in Europe, to some extent, to invest in education and in the society to be better prepared for disasters and shocks. And with that, I would like to close from my side, maybe very final remarks. The record of the webinar will be available publicly. We would like to share that via LinkedIn, for example, the link, and it will be shared also via the website of the ERC. So anyone who missed it, they will have the chance to look at the material. And then finally, so if you would be in a conference, we will now go out and take a nice picture on the stairs under the sunshine. But unfortunately, we are here in the digital world. So if it is possible for those and who would like to be on the picture, could you please turn on your camera so we can make a screenshot or take a picture? I would like to invite our photographer, Christian. I hope you're here to take on screenshot. It's also good to see faces finally. And I think once Christian tells us it is okay, then we go for it. So I
just a few more seconds to give everyone the chance to turn on their camera.
Okay, thanks a lot. So anyone who is here, who can hear us, please turn on your camera if possible. If not, maybe not a big deal.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. I think it's fine, right? Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care of yourself. Have a good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Thanks a lot. And we hope to continue these kind of webinars and on the topic of resilience of infrastructure and energy. Thank you very much.